Hello.
Oh, hello.
Susie's saying hello as well.
Oh, hey, Susie. Hey, 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 Susie. Susie, hey. Susie.
Honestly, she never comes down ever. But then as soon as I set up to record, she's like, "Oh, recording, are we?"
I love you more than anything. Susie.
I'm gonna just start the episode with an apology
Oh,
to all of our YouTube watchers. I'm tired. I haven't put makeup on. I don't care. This is my face. I
this is
can't.
my face. You can take it how you want.
I can't do anything about it.
Well, on that note about YouTube, um, I just wanted to give a shout out to our listeners and our viewers and everything else because they're just so amazing. Because we did have, well, one person that said that they felt we were being inappropriate and laughing. We do laugh a lot in this pod, but we are not laughing at the expense of the victims.
Yeah.
We are laughing at each other always because that is what we do.
Yeah. And
We
that's why people love our
constantly.
podcast, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. But we had some fierce listeners that were instantly jumping on it. Silly Billy Lily, this shout out is for you.
For coming to our
Coming
defense.
to our defense and defending us and the podcast. And she said the podcast is awesome. And we think that you are awesome,
Yes.
Lil. Yeah, she is one of our avid listeners, and she is actually the listener that I passed a message on to you, Sarah, about the Jack the Ripper.
Ah,
Yeah, and I only realised that it was the same person, and I suddenly thought about it the other day, and I thought, wait a minute,
I know that
wait a
name.
minute, is there a chance that that is the same person? So I just had that realization, and yeah, we love you a massive amount.
Yeah. Thank you.
And she loves us and she loves the podcast. So yeah, big shout out and a big thank you to you, Lil. And I have actually got a random blam from Lil.
All right.
So
Well,
on
we're not
that
doing.
note,
No,
random
no,
blams,
no,
go. No, 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 no.
no. I told you I was tired. I don't even have one ready.
No, 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 no,
I forgot.
no, fucking hell. Well, I'm going to tell you all Lil's random blam. And she specifically said, I've got a random blam for you. And she was all excited. And I said, wow, what's that? And she said, you know, pole dancers.
I know him. Yeah.
Yeah, really well. Um, when they're spinning round the pole, they're not actually spinning round the pole. The
No, the
pole
pole
is spinning.
spins.
Yeah.
I used to do pole, didn't I?
You did. Yeah, you
Yeah,
did.
but mine was static. My pole didn't spin.
So you had to go.
So my flesh burnt away on the pole,
Oh, goodness.
slid
Yeah.
down it.
Well, on that note, maybe I don't recommend static pole dancing then. So
No,
yeah.
I mean I did love it, but
But
I
yeah,
can't do that.
Lil is a very good pole dancer, and yeah, she gave us that nugget for those that didn't know. I was one of those. I had no idea. I just thought you maybe had to grease yourself up before you threw yourself round the pole. I
No.
don't know.
No,
Greasy
you
pole dancers.
if you greased yourself up, you just slip straight down.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean I would. Yeah. I'd
Yeah.
be all covered in some sort of grease flying around and my bulk would take me round at quite a speed, I should imagine, because I'd
Well,
probably
like orbit.
yeah, I'd take a run up. I'd take a run up and launch at it. Yeah, so my fat, greasy body would be hurtling round that pole at the speed of light. So yeah, but now I know that I don't need to. I can just spin on the pole.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's still incredibly difficult.
Oh my
It,
goodness. I
yeah.
honestly, I mean, I'm joking. I would not be able to do that.
Yes.
Physically, I would not be able to hold myself in any kind of
It's
gracious
so, and I'll tell
position.
you what, it is painful.
It's
I
hard
remember
work, isn't it?
I climbed up the pole once, just climbed up it to get higher. And the bruises I had on the top of my foot. Why'd you spit your drink out?
I climbed up the pole, just climbed up it. Oh, why?
Just wanted to get a bit higher, didn't I? Because some
Like a
moves,
fireman's pole.
some moves you have to be up higher because you bend over backwards. So if you was just on it at your height and you bend over backwards, you're gonna hit your head on the floor. So you have to climb up it. But the
Goodness.
bruises I had on my top of my foot, because you use the top of your foot to push against the pole to
Right.
inch your way up. Inner thighs.
Goodness.
Oh, my ribs as well. I used to get so many bruises on my ribs.
Really?
Yeah, really like properly red, purpley
Deep
ones.
bruises.
Yeah, yeah, great fun it was. Gosh, I love that.
Goodness. Yeah, it sounds it. Yeah.
Well,
But
my
yeah.
random blam is on the subject of greasy, slimy stuff.
He's talking
I've
about me
just
pole dancing.
Yeah. The average nose produces a cupful of nasal mucus every day.
Oh, no, thank you.
I know. We was
No.
watching the program Alone, the
Uh-huh.
USA.
I love
God,
that.
I love that. I'm in such awe of everybody. This guy created a proper fishing rod. You know, some people just use a long stick.
Yeah.
He got a proper fishing rod. It had like a bit to put his reel on, like honestly, and I was like, wow. My goodness. And one guy created a proper hinged door, like a door for his wooden shack that he'd built himself. And it had a hinge so the door opened and it
So
had a
clever.
handle so it properly closed. And I was just like, fucking hell.
People are so
Sometimes
cool.
if I try and cook a pork chop sometimes, that gets fucked right up. Sometimes I can't do just normal everyday things. And
I mean, most of the time, you and I can't adult, can we?
we can't adult, no. But
No.
where I was going with this is we was watching Alone, and to survive, obviously, if they haven't got any food and things like that, they can't just keep drinking water or having mushrooms. They need electrolytes
Mm.
and salts and things like that. Salt is very good for our bodies. And
Mhm.
the woman was like, I'm not gonna lie to you, I've been eating my own snot.
Oh, God, no, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't like that at all.
So you don't realize how much you produce a day that it can keep you going. If you're ever in a
Yeah.
sticky situation
Oh, God, don't say
without
sticky.
food,
Blech. No,
eat your snot.
honestly, I can't. Bleh, bleh. No, I'd rather die. I would
Right, well,
rather die than do that. I nearly punched a woman out in front of her small child for this kind of thing because her child didn't have a tissue and it had a snotty face and she did something with her mouth and the child's nose. And I swear to God, that's the closest I've come. And it was in a restaurant. It was when I used to manage a restaurant,
oh.
and I physically took her out of the restaurant.
Well, that's a cultural thing, isn't it? That's what some cultures do to clear. We use a pipette to
No,
suck
I
out the
don't.
snot.
No, I don't. I don't. This is the biggest part of why I don't have birthed my own
I think you're
children.
going into a Matthew Shepherd right now. I can see it.
Oh, it's making me sick. Okay, random blams done.
That's what you get for making me do a random blam.
Sorry, Blair.
Well, the reason I was going to stop you from doing a random blam was because we do have another shout out.
Hey, we can do that now.
Okay. And we're going to shout out to Shelley
Shelley
for joining our little blamily. Thank you for subscribing. And I believe you've listened to all of the blams by the time this comes out, because I can see when people listen to the blams and when we get a new subscriber, we get views on those blams. So I think you've listened. So I hope you've enjoyed them and the many more to come.
Many more, many, many more
Many,
to
many
come.
more.
Yeah.
So thank
Thanks,
you.
Shelley. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We appreciate you.
And if you're getting FOMO, if you listen to this going, oh, I want to shout out. I want to listen to the blams. You need to join our little Blamley and subscribe. It's $3 a month or £2 something if you're living in England. And you get access to all of the additional content. So there's a link in the episode. If you listen to this episode, just scroll down on your in the description, click on the link. Sorted.
And also, if you're a member of our Blamley at a time coming soon, you will be sent out a present. But only if
Yeah,
you happen to be in our Blamley at that time.
we're trying.
Yeah,
Getting there.
we are very trying. Yes, it's true. All right. Well, should we episode?
Yeah, I forgot it was my episode. Gosh, I haven't even got my notes up.
Oh,
I say my notes. It's not
how
notes, is it?
unprofessional, Sarah.
I know.
All right. Is this going to be an episode where we can't laugh?
No, absolutely not.
Good. Because, I mean, even when it is inappropriate, I still do. So there. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's episode then.
All right.
Morning, morning.
That's wrong.
I just had a sudden rebellious tone where I
Well,
thought, I'm not going to.
No, I and our listeners do not care for it. Do it again.
Morning.
Morning.
Morning, morning.
Morning. Morning indeed. So I have got an episode that is so great for me. It might not be for anyone else.
So good for you.
So great for me. Because if you're a long-term listener and you've like listened to all of our episodes, then you'll kind of have gotten to know myself and you'll have gotten to know Kate as well. And the episodes that we choose to bring you are almost like a reflection of the kind of things that perplex us.
Yeah.
Because you've got very different topics to the topics that I choose, and you become very passionate about subjects that I don't, and I become very passionate about subjects. But and so if you've listened to all of our episodes, you may or may not have picked up on the fact that I am massively perplexed by human behavior. What drives somebody to do these things? What drives them to be a certain way, or what shaped them into doing these things? You know, we did the Michael Crow episode, the all sorts of episodes like that I just don't understand how anybody could do.
Yeah, I think
sort of
you've
thing.
got a real passion for like the psychology side of things.
So that's exactly what this episode is about. So human behavior is incredibly interesting to me. I find it so perplexing and so fascinating how each individual can be just so different, and how our behavior can be shaped by certain things.
Yeah.
And that's why I've chosen today's episode. And if you're also interested in psychology, especially the psychology of human behavior, things like that, then you're probably already aware of the Stanford Prison Experiment, because this was an experiment conducted by a psychologist, Philip Zimbardo, who he's a bit like a cartoon character, to be honest. And it was conducted in the very early 70s, and it became incredibly controversial, not only due to its findings, but also due to the ethical concerns of the experiment itself. So I'm going to go into the background of Philip Zimbardo and what happened from there. So Philip Zimbardo was born March 23rd, 1933 in New York. And as a child, he was quite sickly. He survived an early childhood illness that kind of left him depleted and left him open to or susceptible to getting other illnesses. And because of that, he was quite small, he was quite weedy, and he was picked on by the other children. He was also a second generation Sicilian American immigrant growing up on welfare in a bad neighborhood. So he kind of had it a bit tough.
Yeah.
As he got older, he started becoming good at sports, and he was funny, and he won people over with his humor, and he was no longer bullied. So he became somewhat of the opposite of what he had been just a few years prior. And now he was the leader of his group of friends. So there was a massive shift in power in him as a teenager. And this led him to become very interested in human behavior, because people had seen him sick and weak and they bullied him because of it. And now he'd risen to healthy and popular. They had a very different attitude towards him. So he became very interested in all things to do with psychology and human behavior, this shift of power in people and how they react to it and how others react to those individuals in that position of power. In the 1940s, World War II happened, the Holocaust happened, an event where seemingly normal, innocent, good German military folk were asked to do horrendous things and complied. And all these things shaped his interest in psychological behaviours. And he went on to do a triple major in psychology, sociology, and anthropology. During his studies, he met a fellow student with a very similar interest in human behaviour. And they kind of asked each other the same questions. Could good people do bad things when in a position of power? What happens when you put good people in a bad place? Does humanity prevail, or does the evil take over? What happens when you put a good apple in a bad batch of apples? And this fellow student just happened to be Stanley Milgram. And you look a bit blank, like you don't know who Stanley Milgram is.
I don't.
And I was just going to say, if you've listened to episode 47, then you'll know Stanley Milgram. But you was there when we recorded it. So
what episode was that?
The phone stalker episode.
Oh, okay.
So in that episode, I mentioned Stanley Milgram because he became very well known for his experiment on obedience.
Right, yeah.
So his experiment posed the question, are we more likely to obey someone just because they are an authority figure?
Right.
So in the phone stalker episode, staff at McDonald's received a phone call from Officer Scott, telling them to do all sorts of things to a fellow member of staff because they were suspected to have stolen some money.
Yeah, horrendous things. Yeah.
Horrendous things, but they each stepped up a notch. So it was at first just asking to search their pockets, very normal entry-level things. But as they complied, the behaviours started getting worse. And then with each step that they complied, they were like, right, what else can we do? They would comply. What else can we do? They would comply until it ramped all the way up to sexual assault.
Yeah.
That these people were doing. And because Officer Scott had told them to do it, it was okay. And so the lengths that people obeyed the instructions of Officer Scott are just astounding. So if you haven't listened to the episode, then you absolutely must, because it's mental. And Milgram's experiment was essentially the same. In 1963, he created an experiment of obedience under the pretense that it was a study about learning. Are people able to learn better if they receive some sort of pain when they got an incorrect answer? So Milgram asked for volunteers, and their job was to read the learner a set of questions. The learner had to repeat the words back, and these got harder and harder. A wrong answer resulted in the volunteer needing to give the learner a small shock under the instructions of the authority figure, which was just stood by the side in a white lab coat. And for each wrong answer, the voltage went up. So it started off very, very minimal, and then they would get it wrong again, it would go up, get it wrong again, it would go up. Unbeknownst to the volunteer, the authority figure and the learner receiving the shocks were actors. and no shocks were actually being received. But that didn't stop the volunteers from scaling the shocks all the way up from very minimal to lethal. So even when the learners were crying out and begging for it to stop, volunteers would still continue administering shocks because the authority figure would ask them to. So the experiment essentially showed that under certain situations, good people could do bad things. So Zimbardo wanted to conduct his own experiment. So in 1971, while professing at Stanford University, he came up with the idea for the Stanford Prison Experiment. He wanted to see what ordinary good people would do when put into a horrible situation such as the American prison system, a system where naturally guards and prisoners don't mix. They're two different types of people, the authority and the anti-authority. So naturally, these two would clash, and it would be a negative space. But in the prison system, these people chose to be guards, to be a powerful authority figure. And similarly, the prisoners chose to be prisoners. They are natural rule breakers that don't respond to authority figures. But what would happen if people didn't naturally choose these positions for themselves? They didn't choose to have power and control over people, or they didn't choose to rebel against that power and control. Would there still be discord amongst prisoners and guards? So Zimbardo put out an advert in the local paper asking for volunteers. The ad reads, "Male college students needed for psychological study of prison life, $15 per day for 1 to 2 weeks beginning August the 14th. For further information and applications, come to room 248 Jordan Hall, Stanford University." Sounds easy enough, right? $15 a day for a college student on summer break. Easy money. In today's money, that would have been nearly $100 a day.
Woo. Nice.
So why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
The ad got 70 responses, and Zimbardo and his team gathered up all the volunteers and began to whittle them down. He interviewed each man, asking questions to determine their personality type. Have you ever been violent? Have you ever taken illegal drugs? Asking questions about their mental state, asking questions about their anger, things like that. Because he needed to eliminate any candidate with potentially psychological problems, medical issues, or a history of crime or drug abuse. Because he wanted good people. So he ended up with 24 people whom he judged to be the most physically and mentally stable, the most mature, and the least involved in antisocial behaviours. He drew up a consent form and had them all sign it. And here is the consent form. It says, "I," whoever their name is, the undersigned, "hereby consent to participate as a volunteer in a prison life study research project to be conducted by the Stanford University Psychology Department. The nature of the research project has been fully explained to me, including, without limitation, the fact that paid volunteers will be randomly assigned to theories of either prisoner or guards for the duration of the study. I understand that participation in the research project will involve a lack of privacy, that I will also be expected to participate for the full duration of the study, that I will only be released from participation for reasons of health deemed adequate by the medical advisors to the research project, or for other reasons deemed appropriate by Dr. Philip Zimbardo, principal investigator of the project, and that I will be expected to follow directions from the staff members of the project or from the participations in the research project. I am submitting myself for participation in this research project with full knowledge and understanding of the nature of the research project and that I will be and what will be expected of me. I specifically released the principal investigator and the staff members of the research project, Stanford University, its agents and employees, and the federal government, its agents and employees, from any liability to arising in any way out of my participation in the project."
Ooh.
And I've put that in there because we'll see at the end whether you think the consent form fully covered the nature of the research project has been fully explained to me, is the line there. So we'll see.
So, I mean,
He
that'd put me off. That'd put me off straight away.
he asked all 24 candidates one last question. Would you rather be a prisoner or a guard? And I will also ask the same question to yourself and the listeners at the end of the episode. But what do you think they all chose?
God.
Each candidate replied that they would rather be a prisoner than a prison
Oh.
guard. It was the early 70s. They were all free-loving. Peace. Peace, baby.
Okay.
Long hair, love,
Yeah.
kind of people. No one liked guards, they said.
Okay. That makes
So
sense.
Zimbardo decided who his prisoners and who his guards were going to be based on the flip of a coin. 12 prisoners, 12 guards. 9 of each with 3 reserves. So now we needed a prison. Down in the basement of Stanford University, he turned what would normally have been a corridor with offices on one side into his prison. So he sectioned off a part of the corridor containing 3 offices, which were to become prison cells, and then boarded off each end of the corridor so that it was enclosed. He took the doors off the offices and replaced them with mock prison cell doors. A door with the glass panel removed and bars installed and cell numbers placed on them. These new prison cells held 3 beds, one next to the other, and that is all. The corridor that the prison cells led out onto would become the outside space. The only area the prisoners would be allowed into for the next 2 weeks for roll call, for meal times, for exercises. And built into the wall adjacent to the cells was a teeny tiny cupboard. And it was 2 foot square with no windows, and it was just to hold brooms or the Hoover or whatever it is. And this was to become the whole solitary confinement, big enough for bad prisoners to standing for however long was warranted. At one end of the boarded up corridor was a small opening through which a video recorder was set up to record the experiment. The cells were also bugged with an intercom system to monitor what was being said in the cells, and also for public announcements to be made to the prisoners. Outside of the boarded up corridor was the prisoners' toilets, the guards' quarters, and also space for the prison superintendent, Mr. Zimbardo himself. And he placed himself in this role to oversee the running of the prison. He had his volunteers sorted, and now he had his prison sorted. He just needed to go over the rules of the prison with the guards before the experiment could start. The day before the experiment was due to start, he gathered all the guards together in a room for orientation. They were handed their prison guard uniform, handcuffs, a billy club, all official guard items to make them feel and look just like real prison guards, because that's what they were going to be. Zimbardo then handed them a pair of silver mirrored sunglasses. These had to be worn at all times. And it was a way for them to distance themselves from the prisoners, which is a very strange move for an experiment that wanted to show natural human behaviour, but we'll touch on that at the end.
True.
Lastly, they were all informed of the prison rules. They were to maintain the natural order of the prison at all costs. However, they were explicitly instructed not to physically harm the prisoners. They could, however, create feelings of boredom, a sense of frustration and fear, a feeling that their lives were completely controlled by the guards. They will have no privacy, no civil rights. There would be nothing they could say or do that the guards wouldn't be aware of. They were to take their individuality and leave them with a complete sense of powerlessness and hopelessness. They needed to know that the guards held all the power and control, and they had none. And that is a direct quote from Zimbardo himself. So he starts to tell them what's going to happen to the prisoners tomorrow. And they all the guards sitting in the room, they all have a big laugh at their expense. So already The guards feel like the prisoners are below them.
Mm.
The following day, the experiment is due to start. Squad cars were sent out to the prisoners' homes. Police got out, knocked on their doors, arrested them on their doorstep for petty crimes, drug offences, something like that. And this was all done in front of loved ones, family members, neighbours, some of which had no idea what was going on. They had no idea that they'd signed up for this experiment, and some of the prisoners actually had no idea what was going on either, because they'd forgotten the start date of the experiment.
Oh, goodness.
They were all read their rights. It placed face down on the bonnet of the police cars, searched, handcuffed, and then placed inside police cars. They were driven to the local police station where they were officially booked in. They had their fingerprints taken, their photo taken. They were then blindfolded. Once blindfolded, they were put into another van and transported to the Stanford University prison. Once prisoners arrived, one by one, they were stripped naked and deloused with a spray. They had a metal chain attached to one ankle. It was like a long chain link chain looped around their ankle and then padlocked together. A reminder of their imprisonment. They were given a uniform to put on, a prison smock, a dress, which essentially came down to their thighs, depending on how tall they were. They weren't permitted to wear underwear at all, and they were given a net stocking to put over their hair, a symbol of de-individualization to represent prisoners having had their head shaved. They were given rubber flip-flops, or like prison shower shoes. And lastly, they were given their prisoner ID number. They were no longer allowed to go by name. They were their numbers, and the guards were correctional officers. Prisoners were instructed not to speak to the guards unless spoken to, and to always address them as correctional officer, Mr. Correctional Officer. And from here on out, I'm going to refer to the prisoners as their prison number, because that it's not a mark of disrespect. It's just it's easier for all of us, because there's a lot of names involved.
Okay.
Also, a lot of these men don't like to be named, and if you tried to search for their names, you wouldn't find them. There's only a few people's names and things like that, but they had a lot of reoccurrence further on down the line, so a lot of them like to stay private. So I'm just going to refer to them as their prison number.
Cool.
So after all this had happened, it was only then that they were allowed to remove their blindfold, and they were placed into their cells. So for the prisoners, they weren't necessarily in the basement of Stanford University. They were now in a prison. They hadn't walked through the Stanford University. They hadn't seen that it was like boarded up at the ends, or the flimsy cardboard that was used. To them, they had come straight in, and they were now in their prison cell. And during this initial intake of all the prisoners, stripping them naked, delousing them, with their blindfolds on, things like that, the guards had already started to mock them. Just light hazing, almost like locker room hazing, mocking them while they were naked, getting them to look in the mirror once they had their prison smocks on to see how ridiculous they looked, calling them names, mocking their penis and whatever else, things like that. Once all 9 prisoners arrived, they were put 3 in each cell. They had strict regimented routines to stick to: meal times, roll call, exercise times, and guards would be in charge of getting the prisoners out of their cells at the correct time, because there was no clock in the prison. There was no windows in the prison. Prisoners had no sense of time. It led for a very time-distorted experience for them. But guards had a clock in their quarters. The guards were on duty 12 hours at a time, and then they were allowed to go home while the next shift came in. So you had a day shift and a night shift. 4 guards were on duty at any time, and there was 3 reserve guards. So you had 4 daytime, 4 nighttime, and then 3 in reserve. But I think 1 guard dropped out of the reserve, so there was 11 in total. But for the remainder of the first day, the prisoners and guards tried to settle into their roles, but still not really fully taking things seriously. Prisoners had to be led blindfolded to the toilets, and this was an opportunity for them to kind of chat to the guards, which they weren't allowed to do, or they would grumble a little bit about this silly experiment. And some of them would say, "Oh, they're taking it a bit far, aren't they? You know, it's just an experiment. It's going a bit far." During counts, prisoners would laugh and talk. They had to call out their numbers, and they were kind of a little bit unsure of what to do and things like that. So it was all a little bit not strict and regimented. It was all a bit uneasy. The guards didn't know where they stood. The prisoners didn't know where they stood. And so while all this was happening, the prisoners were laughing and talking and joking, and guards were kind of unsure about what to do about it. And they were told to maintain order at all costs, but they didn't really know how to handle it. So they would start by making the prisoners repeat their numbers until they could do it properly, just telling them off for laughing, that sort of thing. Come on, guys, stop laughing. We need to get the roll call done. They would get them to count the numbers up and then do it again backwards. Just silly things. And the first day went without a hitch, really. And Zimbardo watched from his little prison superintendent room, and he was a little bit worried for his experiment. The daytime guards clocked off for the night. They debriefed the night shift guards and so continued the experiment. 2:30 a.m. roll call had the fresh night guard shift come in, rudely wake up the prisoners by blowing their whistles. They had to do counts, and they would bang on the cell doors with their batons and get the prisoners out of their cell to stand in line and repeat their numbers over and over again. And it was important for Zimbardo that these counts happened regularly and on time to familiarize the prisoners with their numbers. But more importantly, it gave the guards an opportunity to interact more intimately with the prisoners and an opportunity to exert their power and control over them. Some guards took this more naturally than other guards. Some that were still unsure about what to do just kind of stood back and watched the more assertive guards come in and do what needed to be done. But still nothing really was happening, and the prisoners were allowed to go back to bed. So day one, this is the first full day in the prison. So on the morning of the first full day, tired from being woken up in the night from their counts, tired from the rubbish beds that they had to sleep on, tired from being woken up every time they turned over because their ankle chain was clinking together, prisoners staged a rebellion.
Oh.
Prisoners in cell 1 refused to come out of their cell for the 10 a.m. morning counts. They pulled off their stocking caps, ripped off their prisoner numbers, pushed their beds up against their cell doors so the guards couldn't come in. They shouted abuse at the guards, called them names, swore at them, and the other prisoners from the other cells kind of watched on in admiration. Now, prisoner 8612, the leader of the rebellion, can be heard loudly protesting from his cell. Fuck the experiment. Fuck Zimbardo. The morning guards called in the 3 reinforcement guards as backup, and the night guards stayed on voluntarily to help settle the rebellion. They took fire extinguishers and used it to spray the cold foam into the cells at the prisoners, forcing the prisoners to back away from the doors. They then opened the cell doors, removed the prisoners' beds, and stripped the prisoners and took away their clothing. They placed prisoner 8612 into solitary confinement, and he can be heard screaming, "This isn't a real prison. They don't take your bed or your clothes in a real prison." But another instigator of the rebellion had his feet chained together as punishment. And the rebellion was squashed. The guards had won this war. However, there had been more guards than prisoners this time. So what happened when the shift returned to normal and there were less guards than prisoners? How would they maintain control? The prisoners had already demonstrated that they could be dangerous inmates. And they had to make sure that they like had really stamped out this rebellion because they did not want it to start up again. So they came up with the idea of creating a privileged cell. This cell was for prisoners least involved with the rebellion. They were allowed their beds back. They were allowed their clothes back. They were given food that the other prisoners were denied. They were allowed to wash themselves and brush their teeth. Another privilege denied to the troublemakers. So they kind of tried to separate the prisoners. Instead of them banding together, they tried to be like, if you're going to be naughty, essentially, this is how you're going to be treated. If you're going to be good, this is how you're going to be treated. But the guards didn't foresee how strongly the prisoners had bonded with each other. The privileged cell went on a hunger strike until the other prisoners were allowed their food. One prisoner placed in the hole refused to come out until all the beds had returned. The guards were finding it very difficult to assert their power and control over the prisoners. Day 2. So by day 2, prisoners had started growing wary of having their beds removed, of having their clothes removed. They were hungry from their hunger strike. They were tired, and they wanted access to the privileged cell. Guards had started taking away bathroom privileges, making prisoners defecate in a bucket in their cell, and then even sometimes refusing to empty that bucket in the cell so that it would absolutely stink. And guards now used counts as a form of humiliation for the prisoners, a chance to get them to perform ridiculous things, sing their numbers up and down the line, sing them backwards. If they were singing, that's not singing, sing it like this, sing it higher, sing it in a falsetto, sing it in a girl's voice, that sort of level of humiliation. If someone messed up, they would have to start again. Sometimes if people messed up, they were forced to do jumping jacks or push-ups. Each new discipline that the guards installed in the prison would slowly ramp up, hour by hour. So you didn't realise the intensity because it was only a little bit worse than, before.
Yeah.
Instead of just getting them to say their numbers, they were now getting to sing the numbers. So every little thing kind of bumped up a little bit. So, for example, counts were no longer just about prisoners shouting out their numbers. These were opportunities for the guards to make prisoners do whatever they wanted, like push-ups, star jumps. Push-ups while a guard placed a foot on their backs, or having other prisoners sit on them to do the press-ups. When handing out blankets or pillows, they would make the prisoners say, please, and do you think you deserve your pillow back? And they'd be like, yeah. And he'd be like, no. Yes, what? Yes, please. I don't think you mean it. I think you need to say it again. You need to say it with more conviction. Maybe you need to sing it. I want you to sing me a song so you can get your pillow back. Just really humiliating, degrading things that just knock you down bit by bit.
Chipping away at them, chipping away.
Absolutely. And prison superintendent Dr. Zimbardo watched on, ticking off his checklist as the guards did their duties. One guard in particular began to stand out as the lead guard, the one to dole out the punishments and instruct other guards to carry out the punishments. So godlike was he that prisoners nicknamed him John Wayne, as his character was reminiscent of John Wayne's character in Cool Hand Luke.
Right.
He even adopted a strange southern accent, and his name was Dave Eshelman, and he becomes quite prominent later on, which is why he's named. And Zimbardo often remarked on his creativeness within the prison, his creativeness in terms of punishments and things like that. And all these punishments and tiring exercises had begun to take its toll on prisoner 8612. He'd begun to complain of headaches and stomach aches, and he asked to see Zimbardo. But he was first taken to see the prison warden, who was an ex-convict who Zimbardo had gotten in to make sure the prison was running as a prison should. The warden ridiculed prisoner 8612, telling them that he was just a white boy that couldn't even cope with minimal prison hardships. He then went on to see the prison superintendent, Dr. Zimbardo himself, who, instead of treating him as a doctor conducting an experiment or as a volunteer in the experiment, the superintendent spoke to the prisoner and offered him a deal. He would ask the guards to lay off him with the punishments, but he would need to become a prison snitch and relay information back to Zimbardo of what the other prisoners were saying or doing. He tells prisoner 8612 to go back to his cell and to think it over. And when he goes back to his cell, he tells his fellow prisoners that they're not allowed to leave. I've asked to leave, and he said no. So they're stuck there. He can be seen on video after this during counts, refusing to go up against the wall, telling the guards that if he was to be stuck here, then he's not going to put up with any of their shit. The news that they weren't allowed to leave hit some of the prisoners hard. It no longer felt like a silly experiment. It was a real prison, and they had to do whatever they could in order to survive. And later that night, prisoner 8612 went into an uncontrolled rage, screaming and shouting from his cell.
So fucked up inside. I feel really fucked up inside. You don't know. I gotta go. I just to a doctor. Anything. I mean, Jesus Christ, I'm burning up inside. Don't you know? I can't say that. I'm fucked up. I don't know how to explain it. I'm fucked up inside. I don't know.
In less than 36 hours into the experiment, prisoner 8612 was released. Day 3. Day 3 was visitation day. Parents and loved ones were allowed to come and see the prisoners for an allotted 10 minutes at a time. Only 2 visitors were permitted per prisoner, and a letter had been sent out to parents before the visit detailing the prison rules. The prison was scrubbed from top to bottom. A sign placed over the hole indicated it was solitary confinement was taken down. All the prisoners were fed a special hot meal and were expressly told not to moan about the prison, otherwise their visitation would be cut short. Zimbardo didn't want anything to jeopardize the running of his prison. When visitors arrived at the prison, they were greeted by an attractive receptionist that took their details. Music was played over the intercom system so that it would appear more friendly, and they were asked to wait half an hour while their loved ones finished a special meal, including a lovely dessert. However, after visitation, many parents complained to Zimbardo about the condition of their son. He seemed withdrawn, unhappy. He didn't seem like himself. Some even started making plans to contact a lawyer on the basis of false imprisonment. Zimbardo obviously didn't want this, so he spoke to the parents and essentially gaslit them, telling them that basically they must have raised a weak son.
Oh.
When one mother told him that she had never seen her son looking so bad, he responded by saying, "What's the matter with your boy? Doesn't he sleep well?" Then he asked the father, "Don't you think your boy can handle this?"
Oh, goodness.
He made it seem like if they felt their son was having an issue, it was because he was weak, not because the prison was hard. So fathers left their son in the prison so as not to emasculate them and to prove a point. They had not raised a weak boy, and he absolutely could stand these 2 weeks in a fake prison.
He's a man.
During the visitation, Zimbardo had gotten wind of a rumour. Prisoner 8612, who had been released from the experiment just hours earlier, was planning to bring a group of friends down to the prison and release the prisoners. He could not allow this to happen. Nothing was going to stop his prison from running. So he decided to move the prison. He and the guards dismantled the prison and moved it and all the prisoners to a room on the top floor. He then went back down to the corridor, propped up a chair, and sat in wait for prisoner 8612 and his gang. His plan was to tell them that the experiment was over, that he had released all of the prisoners. And then he had planned to lure prisoner 8612 back into the prison and tell him that he had been paroled under false pretenses, and then to lock him back up with the other prisoners.
Goodness.
But none of this happened. Prisoner 8612 didn't show up. There was no attempted breakout. So the guards had to reassemble the prison back downstairs, move all the prisoners back down. They'd essentially wasted most of the day moving everything around for no reason. So they were not happy, and this showed.
Oh.
Day 4, the prison guards were now fully into their roles. There was no question of who had the power and authority anymore. During counts, they would make the prisoners do all sorts of humiliating, degrading things, and sometimes these counts would last for hours. Instigated by John Wayne, he would have the prisoners face each other, hug them, get them to hug each other, tell them how much they loved them. He would get them to bend over and get another prisoner to fake sodomy on them. He would then have them sing Amazing Grace while doing push-ups, or command them to pretend that they were having sex with the floor. Prisoners were forced to shine the guards' shoes and to clean out toilet bowls with their bare hands.
Ugh.
One prisoner had had enough. Prisoner 819. When it came time for the 11:30 a.m. counts, he refused to come out of his cell and trashed it. A stand that would normally have meant other prisoners got involved and a rebellion would have broken out. However, there was now a massive divide amongst prisoners, and they didn't want any trouble. So instead of being a band of prisoners, they were now individuals trying to do whatever they could to just survive. As punishment, the rest of the prisoners were forced to do menial tasks, relentless exercises, pushing boxes backwards and forwards along the corridor. When prisoner 819 finally decided to come out of his cell, he was put into solitary confinement. And at this time, a prison chaplain had come into the prison to speak with the prisoners. So Zimbardo had asked for his opinion on prison conditions and the conditions of the prisoners. He wanted to know if his experiment resembled a real prisoner's, and if his volunteers resembled real prisoners. So each prisoner was given time to speak to the chaplain. However, prisoner 819 refused and remained in solitary confinement. During the discussion with the chaplain, each prisoner introduced themselves. Over half the prisoners introduced themselves by their given number. And when they were asked why they were in prison, most answered with the charge that had been told to them when they were arrested. The chaplain even went so far as to ask them what they were doing in order to try and secure their release. Who were their lawyers? What were they going to do once they were released from prison? He even then rang some parents to give them details of a public defender. So while some of the prisoners were a little bit confused, most were grateful. The reason Zimbardo did that was because he wanted it to essentially be a real prison. So he got the chaplain in like it would do in a prison, asked them questions like they would do in a prison. Prisoner 819 eventually decided that he would speak to the chaplain, and when he did, he broke down hysterically crying. So Zimbardo came and took him into a separate room to try and calm him down and talk to him. He gave him a cup of water, or Zimbardo went to go off and get him a cup of water to bring back. But when Zimbardo went off, he could hear just around the corner in the prison that the guards had gone straight back to punishing the rest of the prisoners for prisoner 819's behavior.
Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Because of what prisoner 819 did, my cell is a mess. Because of what prisoner 819 did, my cell is a mess.
So Zimbardo could hear this, and he thought prisoner 819 can hear this as well. So he goes back to see prisoner 819, and he's sobbing in his hand. He's bawling his eyes out. So Zimbardo said, he gives him the opportunity to leave the prison. He says, it's fine, you can leave. But 819 refused. He said he couldn't leave the prison with the other prisoners thinking that he was a bad prisoner. And he was distraught. He didn't want his fellow prisoners to be punished for what he was doing. He didn't want them to feel like he was a bad prisoner, and he couldn't leave on those terms. And Zimbardo had to remind him that he wasn't a prisoner. This wasn't a prison. They weren't prisoners, and he was free to leave. Zimbardo removed his stocking, his chain, his prison number, and he was free to leave. And it was almost like a weight had been lifted. A realization had kind of hit him, like, oh yeah, I'm not prisoner 819. That day, though, they also held a mock parole hearing for the prisoners. They were all chained together and they had to appear before the parole board. And that was just the prison superintendent, the prison warden, and other people that Zimbardo had gotten in. And Zimbardo asked them all one question. If they had to, would they forfeit the money they had earned up until that point to be released? They all said yes. They were then asked to return to their cells, and they did. Even though they could have all quit there and then, forfeited the money, and been free, they all returned to their cells because they had been instructed to do so by an authority figure. These men were now just completely broken and completely hopeless. Prisoner 819 was replaced with a standby prisoner, and he would become prisoner 416. He was brought in, stripped naked, deloused with a spray, given his uniform, and then he was immediately thrust into the madness of the prison system that was now in full swing. So Zimbardo was interested to see what effect that he would have on the other prisoners, whether this new prisoner that was filled with, hope and resolve that the other prisoners didn't have, whether that would wear onto the other prisoners, whether they would encourage them to or whether it would give them hope almost. So having experienced the escalation of abuse from the guards, the sadistic nature of the counts was no longer a shock to them. However, prisoner 416 was seeing everything with fresh eyes, and he was not about it. He asked the other prisoners, what on earth is going on?
Yeah.
And they told him he had better toe the line. Don't stand up to the guards, just fall in line. They said, it's like a real prison. And he said, that's not what I signed up for. And so he immediately wanted to leave, but the other prisoners said that he couldn't. He could only leave for health reasons, and he was stuck there now with the rest of them. Day 5. On day 5, due to the depravity of the situation that only he seemed able to see, prisoner 416 took a stand and he went on a hunger strike, refusing to eat anything put in front of him. This new rebellion really pissed off the guards. Having worked so hard the last few days to squash all previous attempts at rebellion and get their prison under control, who did this newcomer think he was? Yeah. Testing their authority, upsetting the order. They worried that this rebellion would spread amongst the other prisoners and they would have another full-blown riot. However, the prisoners were now so broken that they wanted nothing to do with prisoner 416 and his hunger strike. He was a troublemaker. He was going to get the rest of them punished. And that's exactly what the guards did. They threatened to take away further visiting rights off the other prisoners if he didn't eat. They made the other prisoners do tireless exercises, but still he wouldn't eat. The other prisoners were shouting at him, would you just eat, damn it? They were frustrated with his behaviour and they ostracised him. They wanted nothing to do with him. So the guards decided to turn the other prisoners against him to see if that would work. When he still refused to eat his sausages at mealtime, they put prisoner 416 into solitary confinement while holding his sausages. And they left him there for 3 hours. Breaking one of their first rules, prisoners were only allowed a maximum of 1 hour in the hole. While he was in solitary confinement, guards had the other prisoners line up and one by one they were asked to pound on the door and shout at prisoner 416 to let him know of their frustrations. Thank you, 416, like banging on this door, this thing that they're in is it's pitch black, it's 2 foot square, there's no ventilation, you can't sit down, you've just got to stand there. And
Yeah, you
they're
said it was
banging
like
on
a
it.
broom closet,
Yeah.
didn't you? Like a broom cupboard. So, yeah.
So having all the prisoners line up and do this, they hoped that that would break his spirit. They released him for the next count, which was run by John Wayne. He made the prisoners do the most embarrassing, degrading things and constantly ridiculed them then for doing it, and then making them do it again. And if it was wrong, he placed paper bags over their heads, made them do exercises. He ordered them to recreate a scene from Frankenstein, walk like Frankenstein, talk like Frankenstein, just like a constant barrage of mental abuse. And it would be like, that's not how Frankenstein walks, do it like this. That's not how he talks, talk like this.
Yeah.
Just a constant barrage. But it wasn't just aimed at the prisoners that didn't fall in line. One prisoner nicknamed Sarge, who was incredibly obedient. He did everything the guards asked, and the guards wanted to see just how far that obedience stretched. So they would ridicule him for being so obedient. And it had become fun for them now. Like, why are you so obedient? Why do you do everything we ask you to do? We're asking you to do really stupid things. Why are you doing it? Just really ridiculing him and making him feel really small. And it almost become fun for them to taunt the prisoners and ridicule them. That wasn't part of their job. Not one of the prisoners protested the cruelty of the counts. Not one of the guards protested the cruelty of the counts. But after the count, prisoner 416 was put back into the hole as he still refused to eat his sausages, which were now dirty and disgusting from being thrown about the hall and things like that. And John Wayne was making it a personal mission to try and break him. So he decided to give the other prisoners choice. He would be willing to let prisoner 416 out of solitary confinement, where he'd spent the majority of the day in this pitch dark cupboard where he could only stand. He would be willing to let him out if the prisoners were willing to give up their blankets. If they weren't willing to trade their blankets for his freedom, then prisoner 416 would spend the remainder of the day in solitary confinement. One by one, the prisoners answered, "I will keep my blanket, Mr. Correctional Officer." Each refused to give up their blankets and were happy for prisoner 416 to stay in the hole. The guards and the prisoners were all happy to allow another person to be trapped in this solitary confinement all night for refusing to eat dirty cold sausages. It's just hanging that out there. Dr. Zimbardo watched all of this from his superintendent office, amazed at the change in his guards and his prisoners. Sat next to him, also watching, was an ex-student of his and also his girlfriend. And he turned to her with a smile on his face. "Look what's happening. Oh, look at these results. Look how far the prisoners come in less than a week." And she looked back at him in horror. "What you're doing to these boys is inhumane. How can you not see the depravity and the cruelty of what is going on here?" And Zimbardo looked absolutely stunned. And she said to him, "If this is the sort of person you are, if you're allowing people to be treated like this because you want to prove a point, I don't want to be your girlfriend anymore. If you're allowing this experiment to completely take over, then she didn't see that he was a good person." And her words kind of snapped him back to reality a little bit, because she was right. This was an experiment. This wasn't a prison. He wasn't a prison superintendent. He had become so absorbed in his role in the prison, just like the guards had, and just like the prisoners had, that he had lost sight of how unethical and torturous his experiment had become. So he had also fallen prey to the very thing that he had been trying to prove in his experiment. He gave himself the role of prison superintendent, and that's exactly what he became. Watching the hours going on, the daily counts, seeing the counts happen, but just ticking the box. Yes, the guards have done this count. Yes, the guards have done this count. Yes, mealtime has taken place. The guards were doing what they should to maintain order. So desensitized to the escalation of things that it took an outsider to point out everything that was going wrong with the experiment. On day 6, the experiment was ended. 4 prisoners in total had been removed from the experiment in its 6 days. Guards had come in for their time on shifts. They were never late. They came in exactly when they should have done. They stayed on when they felt it was needed, and they didn't demand anything extra. They had fully embraced their role as guards, and they seemed to enjoy it. Once the prisoners were released and guards were de-uniformed, they kind of came back together for a debrief, talk about the experiment, and then they were allowed home. Months after the experiment, Zimbardo brought them back to discuss the experiment after they had had time to kind of process it a little bit. And some of the guards couldn't believe their actions. They were disgusted with themselves and with the things that they had done, said that they'd done things that they didn't think that they had ever been capable of. They said while they were acting as guards, they didn't feel any regret or guilt for what they had been doing. It was only afterwards, when they stepped outside of their roles, that did they realise what they had become, what they had been doing to these people. Some of the prisoners said that they felt like that they had really been in a prison. And they didn't look, even now, they don't look back at it as an experiment. They look back at it as a time in prison. They all felt like they had had their identity stripped away and that they had become their prison number. The guard called John Wayne, however, didn't seem to see an issue with his behaviour. He seemed to feel like the experiment was to show how guards could treat prisoners. So that's what he did. He actually said in a conversation with prisoner 416, they had a conversation together after the experiment. And he said to prisoner 416 that he was running an experiment of his own. He wanted to see just how much he could get away with, or how much the prisoners would take before someone stepped in and said enough was enough. Or even just to see if the guards would stop him.
Yeah.
But nobody did. The reality was that over 50 outsiders had come into that prison and witnessed the goings on, and only one person saw an issue with it, and that was Zimbardo's girlfriend.
It was a woman.
Yep. So before we discuss the experiment, if you've got any questions, things like that, I'm going to leave you with a few of Zimbardo's words. These are words from himself, okay?
Okay.
This is after the experiment as well. So on speaking about finding out about the rumoured breakout, Zimbardo says, "How do you think we reacted to this rumour? Do you think we recorded the pattern of rumour transmission and prepared to observe the impending escape? That was what we should have done, of course, if we were acting like experimental social psychologists. Instead, we reacted with concern over the security of our prison." And he says, "I was sitting there all alone, waiting anxiously for the intruders to break in, when who should happen along but a college and former Yale graduate student roommate, Gordon Bauer. Gordon had heard we were doing an experiment, and he came to see what was going on. I briefly described what we were up to, and Gordon asked me a very simple question. What's the independent variable in this study? To my surprise, I got really angry at him. Here I had a prison break on my hands. The security of my men and the stability of my prison was at stake, and now I had to deal with this bleeding heart, liberal, academic, effort ding-dong who was concerned about the independent variable. It wasn't until much later that I realised how far into my prison role I was at that point, that I was thinking like a prison superintendent rather than a research psychologist." So exactly what he was asking, do good people do bad things in a certain situation, he had fallen prey to as well, even though he knew that that's what the experiment was looking for.
Yeah.
The experiment is very controversial, even today. Psychologists debate the ethics of the experiment. They say the findings are flawed because Zimbardo should never have got involved.
Yeah.
B, he swayed some of the findings by giving the guards glasses, by already de-individualizing prisoners, by giving them smocks. And they said that once the prisoners put on their smocks without underwear, they already started to act and walked differently.
Yeah.
So the experiment is very flawed, and they say that the findings are very flawed. I don't think the findings are flawed. I think even if the ethics had been correct, I think the findings would still probably have been the same.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
I would like to discuss it with you if you've got any questions or anything.
Well, yeah, my first point was going to be that, as you've just said, I don't think he should have been involved himself.
Yeah.
Like, I think if he was going to be, controlling the experiment or, conducting the experiment, I suppose, he shouldn't have been the prison superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
I think he should have been removed altogether and just observed. But I agree with you. I think the findings would have been the same.
Yeah.
I think that whenever you have a human being in a position of authority, they're going to push the boundaries, because we push the boundaries as a race. We push the boundaries with everything. Anyway, if you left a bowl out with sweets in it, saying, please take one, majority of people are going to take 2 or 3. Do you know what I mean? We push the boundaries with everything anyway. I think I still would choose to be a guard. And that's purely because I don't deal well with being hungry and tired.
I don't think you deal well with being told what to do either.
No, I don't, definitely. No. I think I would definitely struggle with that. And I would definitely struggle with like whether I should just keep life as easy for everyone and toe the line, or whether I should rebel. Because
it's very difficult, isn't it? Because until you're in that position, Prisoner 416 said that he fully felt that he was Prisoner 416, even though he'd only been there for a day when he started his rebellion. And he was like, Prisoner 416 doesn't want to fall in line.
Yeah.
Who am I if I can't stick up for what I believe in?
Yeah.
Like, and it really, really tormented him. You can see in some of the interviews that he was so tormented about the fact that what was right and wrong, he knew what was right and wrong, and didn't want to just be like, oh, okay, for the sake of everybody else, I'm going to jeopardize my own morality. Or
in that environment, you've got, in a prison environment, you've got very little control over anything. Like, you're told when to sleep, you're told when to go to the toilet, you're told when you can socialize with other people, you're told when you can go outside, things like that. So I think it would be in human nature to fight back with something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, hunger strikes were the only really way they could be like, no, I'm not doing that.
If I can choose not to eat my sausages, then that is my bit of control. And I think it's human nature to want some sort of control, whether it be over what you're doing, whether it's to the extreme and you're trying to control other people. But
as a prison guard, why is it okay in this experiment? Why do they feel like it's such a personal attack on them? You're not going to eat your sausages because I've told you to. That's such a personal attack on me that I'm going to make you eat your sausages.
Yeah.
Why is that a thing?
Yeah.
Why is that such an attack on somebody's own, I don't know, status, I guess? Yeah. The guards have said, you need to eat your sausages, and he's gone, no, I don't want them. They're like, well, I'm going to make you.
It's weird, isn't it? Because I think it happens in so many different walks of life. Even parents. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, don't walk on that grass, please. Parent talking to child, don't go on the grass, stay on the path, please. That child instantly wants to go on the grass.
Step a foot on the grass.
Yeah, and and they're on the grass. And then equally that has a knock-on effect, because then you hear the parent go, I told you,
Yeah.
I told you not to do that, and you deliberately disobeyed me and walked on the grass. Now you're going to be punished. Whereas in the bigger picture,
It doesn't matter, does
is it really that important? Do you know what I mean? Does it really matter? But because that parent has said,
Because
do
they've
not
disobeyed that order.
Yeah, if they hadn't said anything and the child had, taken a couple of steps on the grass and then toddled off, it wouldn't have been such a big thing. But because they've said, don't go on the grass, and they've been directly disobeyed, it's like a personal attack.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like that battle with, like, for control ensues.
I find it just so baffling that not even one person went, why are you doing that? Don't do that. That's a bit much. Yes, we've got to maintain order, but we don't have to make them fuck the floor.
Yeah, exactly. I
You know what I mean? How can you live with yourself with
It's
watching something like that go on and not stand up for somebody?
It's like herd mentality, isn't it? Like,
mob mentality.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're
bystander
either on
effect.
the team of the prisoners and you're all together, you're all representing like one entity, or you're on the team, and it's like instantly you create sides.
Yeah.
Prisoners and guards, and you're either cat team or your dog team, but you are against each other.
Yeah.
God forbid someone should step in and go, do you know what, guys? We're all in this together. Do you know what I mean? We're all in here. We're all part of the experiment. So let's just be nice.
But it is as well like that bystander
interesting.
effect where you think someone else will do it. I don't need to stand up. Surely someone else is going to stand up and say something.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
But do you think that consent form fully outlined what the prisoners were going to go through?
I mean, mostly, yeah, I do. Because when you read it out, as I said at the beginning, that would have put me off. The fact that it says you will only be released if we say you can be released. You're to do what you're told, all of that. But that consent form, that scared me. That scared me probably to the point where I would have gone, I don't know. Maybe I'm not going to do this.
One of the prisoners thought, what a great way to spend the summer because I'm going to be forced to revise. And he thought he would just be able to sit in his cell and use that time to revise his studies, which he was not allowed to do. So that he didn't think it was going to be like this at all. But
yeah, I mean, he did release people, didn't he?
Yes, but under extreme duress. Those people didn't just be like, oh, I've had enough of this, I'm going. They were pushed to their limit and they were hysterical and almost couldn't see outside of the fact that it was a prison. They'd kind of become lost in the fact that they were prisoner, whatever their number was.
Yeah.
And they weren't just leaving because they were like, I don't want to do this experiment anymore.
Yeah, but I guess if they weren't feeling like that, then the experiment would be a bit flim-flammy, wouldn't it? Like at least it was thorough.
Yeah. The experiment, I don't know. I just feel like that's why it baffles me, human behavior, because that should never have happened. Because those people are deemed to be good society people, they didn't get in trouble, they didn't do some of them did weed and things like that, but they didn't do drugs, they didn't fight authority. But that's exactly, they became authority and then they became let's fight authority, even though that's not in their nature. But they were put into this situation where they had to survive.
So
and again, that's almost a bit like the Josefina Rivera. She was like, just do what you need to do. And one of them was like, Deborah was like, no way, I'm not doing what he says.
Yeah, it's fight or flight, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that whole, are you going to push against in the hope that things are going to be better for you? Or are you going to kind of step back and
just lay back and take it?
Yeah, toe the line in the hope that that will work better for you. So yeah, you don't know, do you?
I can 100% say that I would be a prisoner. I would not be a guard. I do not have any authority. I couldn't even pull it out of me. I would be a prisoner, and I would be the prisoner that goes, yep, I'll do that. Yes, guys, come on, man. Just
Come on,
eat
man.
food.
Eat fucking sausages, man.
Fucking hell. I don't want to do any
Yeah.
more push-ups. Just behave. Toe the
Yeah.
line. That's exactly what I would do, and I know I would.
I think I would be better as a guard, and I think today I would be a better guard than I would have been 10 years ago.
You'd have been a John Wayne, man.
Yeah. I'd have been a right bastard 10 years ago. I think now I look into things, I look into my own behavior and my own reactions and my own judgments a lot more than I used to 10 years ago. So I think I would be a better guard now than I was. But yeah, don't know. Maybe we should set up our own prison experiment. Yeah.
I did do an experiment in psychology, actually, and it was about learning, and it was whether scented paper would help you remember if you was then given that scented paper back. And I did that experiment in psychology, and that was real fun to do.
Was it? What was the findings like?
Oh, I think you do. You could, because you remember scents, don't you? And it takes you back somewhere. Or you listen to music and it takes you back and you remember. So having a scent, if you are revising and you've got scented paper or a scented pen, if you then have that same scent in your exam, you'll remember more.
Interesting.
Yeah, was interesting. That was my little experiment that I did in psychology.
Or the smell of popcorn, like really the strong smell of popcorn, really reminds me of the cinema that me and my mates used to go to, like when I was little. And we all used to go to the Brentwood cinema, which is no longer there, sadly. And it just always really smelt of popcorn.
Yeah.
And when I smell puppies' feet, when I smell her paws and they smell like popcorn, that specific popcorny smell reminds me of Brentwood cinema.
Oh, that's
and I love that. I absolutely love that. And someone ruined it for me by saying, that smell is bacteria.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, but do you know what? I like it.
Happy memories.
Yeah, I like the smell of dog foot fungus. So what can I say? Yeah, happy times.
Yeah. But yeah, so that is the Stanford Prison Experiment. There's a lot more information regarding the ethics and things like that of it, but I didn't go too much into that. But I wanted to go more into the behaviour of the individuals then.
Well, I enjoyed that greatly. Thank you.
It's so baffling to me.
Yeah, it is. It's properly perplexing, and it really made my brain move. So hopefully my brain won't have to move much for the rest of the day. So
no.
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to all of our listeners, what would you be? A prisoner or a guard?
Which one?
Let us know.
Let us know.
All right.
Well, we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye.
If you have enjoyed listening to our episodes, make sure you rate us and leave us a review on whatever platform you are listening.
We absolutely love hearing from you guys. So you can also help support our show by donating to our Buy Me a Coffee link. We will make sure that you get a massive shout out and a big thank you in our next week's episode.
You can also follow us on social media at Perplexed Podcasts. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and if you want to see more videos and blooper reels, subscribe to our TikTok and YouTube channels.
You can also email us your stories at perplexedpodcasts@gmail.com.
And you can find all the relevant links in the episode descriptions. Thanks for listening. Bye.